Thanks to the praise team. That was really good. We appreciate Sister Julie making her way up to strum that guitar every time. Somebody give her a hand. Nobody ever claps for her. I said that, tried to get you a compliment, Julie. It might keep you from asking me so many pernicious questions while I'm up here. God bless us all. I'm so glad we've got 3 people I can look at. The others, I've got the, how does Jesus say it? The sheep on my right and the goats on my left. So I don't know who's in front. Maybe the camels.
I thought front seaters were supposed to be ambitious.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Most churches I go to, you've got to come early to get a back seat, you know. Sitting in the rear is where they all... Well, tomorrow is what traditional church calls Holy Thursday. The day that Jesus went and prayed in Gethsemane and was arrested. And taken on Friday. This is according to Christian traditions, all 3 great Christian traditions, Western Catholic and Eastern Orthodox and the Protestant churches. Pretty much follow that idea. So while you're doing everything you do to get ready for Easter, where we celebrate His rising from the dead, we still don't want to forget that somewhere in this week to also remember Jesus was crucified for our sins, laid in a grave for 3 days. I've got some different aspects of sermons about the crucifixion of Jesus, and I was tempted to do one tonight, but I think we'll wait, because as we move through what we're doing, we will come to the crucifixion stories. We were almost finished. I ran out of time last week discussing various ways of looking at this man that was delivered of the multitude of devils. And let's pick it up in Mark chapter 5, and we'll begin with verse 11. Now there was there nigh unto the mountains a great herd of swine feeding. In the Matthew version, we won't pull this up, it says, now there was afar off from them a herd of many swine. Luke repeats Matthew and says, he repeats Luke and says, now there was there a herd of many swine feeding on the mountain. Point is, they weren't near the city of Gadara. It's afar off. There's a mountain between them and the city. They've got this herd of swine out where a lot of people don't see it. And they're raising it to sell pork to the Gentiles that live round about that region. And in Mark it says, and they besought him, saying, send us into the swine, that we may enter in to them. In Matthew, the devils besought him, saying, if thou cast us out, send us away into the herd of swine. And they don't speak in the Luke version. It simply says in the third person, they entreated him that he would give them leave to enter into them. I just want to overlap on something I said last week. Angels, we don't see angels possessing anybody's body, looking for a body to get into, because angels have bodies. Like human beings, angels, I believe, are tripart beings with body that they appear in sometimes, with soul and with spirit. Devils, or what we popularly call demons, seem to possess other people. We read in the Old Testament how an evil spirit entered into Saul. The Spirit of God left him, and an evil spirit replaced it in him. That implies that when the Spirit of God departs, he leaves a vacuum in you that's going to be filled by something. Jesus seemed to speak about this vacuum idea when he said to his disciples, "Greater is he that is in you than he that's in the world." Now, you know, if you fill something up, take a Pepsi-Cola can or orange knee-high or something. What's put in there and sealed is now under a pressure, and it pushes out against the air pressure that's around it. If you pop it open, then if it's under great pressure, take it down to the bottom of deep in the water, and where the pressure is very heavy, that thing will implode because the pressure on the outside is greater than what's on the inside. But there has to be something inside of it to resist the entrance of what's on the outside. And so, nature abhors a vacuum. If the Spirit of God has filled you or been inside of you in some way and he departs, something's going to take that place. Remember what Jesus said about the unclean spirit going out of a man. A vacuum is left. It doesn't take long for something else to come in. So here are these evil spirits, whatever they are, however you want to call them. They have to get into something to exist. In Luke, they say, "Don't cast us into the abyss," or into the deep in some versions. I'm reading from that's in Luke 8:31. "Don't cast us into the deep" in the King James. I'm reading from the RV, the Revised Version. The word is the abyss, the abysmal. And what does it mean? It means non-existence, oblivion. It means to cease to exist. Don't cast us into non-existence. Now that implies, it's very interesting, that for them to exist, they have to animate or infiltrate another being. To me, that's very interesting. What we want to destroy is this man, and they were slowly driving him to suicide. There he is, hating himself, cutting himself with stones all over, sharp stones all over his body, masochistically hurting himself. It's just a stage or two above suicide. They want to drive that man into oblivion. But without him, they're in oblivion also. So now they say, don't drive us into some kind of place or state in which we no longer exist. Kind of parasitic of these things, don't you think? They just drape themselves upon you and begin to suck life out of you and suck righteousness away from you. Got a very interesting story coming up that we'll get into tonight about a woman who touches the hem of Jesus' garment. And in the three versions, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, only in one of them does Jesus look around and say, while she says, "I perceive that something has come into me," Jesus says, "I perceive that something went out of me." I don't know why I'm feeling the touch of the Spirit of the Lord while I'm saying this. It's the exact opposite, and it'll happen on the same day. Evil wanting to come in, having to have something to come into. At any rate, back to our Mark version, chapter 5, verse 13. "And Jesus gave them leave And the unclean spirits came out and entered into the swine, and the herd rushed down the steep into the sea, and the number was about 2,000. Ain't that something? And, Matthew says, and behold, the whole herd rushing down the steep, and it's the cliffs, I think, is what, the steep place is what the KJV says. But they were choked in the sea. They perished in the waters. Now that's where we left off. Now here's where the story continues. Verse 14. And they that fed them fled and told it in the city and in the country. So if they're far away, it takes them a while, not only to look at what has happened, discuss it among themselves and say, what are we going to do? This is amazing. But to actually go into town and tell others. So that takes a little time. Meantime, Jesus, while these swine herders a great way off are worried about that, Jesus is lifting this naked, bloody man up to his feet. Taking a cloak or getting a cloak from one of his disciples and wrapping it around the fellow and holding him by the shoulders and staring into his eyes and saying, will you talk with me? Yeah. Tell me once again. I asked you a little while ago. You wouldn't tell me. Tell me, who are you? What is your name? Jesus is driving the man to his own identity. A person who hates himself now has to see that someone loves him enough to be interested in him. And Jesus sits the man down and touches his shoulder and begins to speak with him. Now, of all that's written in the three Gospels, that's what I wish one of them had put down. Jesus' conversation with this fellow. Now, this is happening while all the swine herders are gathering up their things and looking over the cliff and wondering, are there any of them still alive? We're paid to take care of those animals. Now we're in trouble. Deciding what to do, they're not just afraid of what Jesus did. They're afraid that they've lost their income. And they have got to get their story together. We all going to say it the same way, these different swine herds? Yes. Then let's get into town and find our bosses, the owners of these pigs, and tell them all. And then let's bring witnesses back out here. And so they go into town. Let's say an hour has passed. By the time they tell their story in town and gather others to hear it and witnesses, another hour, maybe two. I'd say conservatively at least another hour, maybe two. And then everyone in the city says, let's all go out and see this thing. And they make the long trip out there over the mountain and across the valley. And Jesus is still sitting and talking with this man. Here's the way it's put. And they came, they told it in the city and in the country. And they came to see what it was that had come to pass. In the Matthew version, they went away into the city and told everything and what was befallen to them that were possessed with the devils. Remember, in the Matthew version, it's not one demoniac, but two. And behold, all the city came out to meet Jesus. In the Luke version, like Mark, they tell it in the city and the country, and they come and find Jesus. And I love the Luke version. Jesus, they found the man from whom the devils were gone out, sitting clothed and in his right mind. Mark also says that. Go to verse 15. Yeah, there. And in his right mind. And they were very much afraid. Now, these people had dealt with this crazy man. They had tried to tie him up. They had tried to keep him from coming around. I discussed last week that he was no criminal. He had done no crime, done nothing wrong, or he would have been taken and stoned to death somewhere. but he was simply driven away. They had found that there was nothing any of them could do for this fellow. But here he is, and the thing that they say in every one of these accounts, all three of them, is that he's in his right mind. It's the mind that the enemy touches. I don't think the devil has much power over your spirit if you're in communion with God. I don't think he can harm your body. But if he can put the wrong ideas, stir up the wrong emotions in your soul, your mind, your will, and emotions, give you the wrong thinking, then he knows you'll go and hurt your body. Some people do it with drugs or alcohol. Some people do it seeking sensations. I know some people that are addicted to speed and they drive like maniacs and end up killing someone or themselves. Had to deal with a funeral last year of a kid that got a brand new car, and 2 days later took it out stomping it to see what it would do, and lost control and killed himself. Some people destroy themselves with addictions. Some people become suicidal. But it's all because of what's happened in the soul, in the mind. Now, someone has tormented this man's mind probably since he was a child. He might have been, and I'm repeating myself, might have been an abused child. Made him talk funnier and act funnier and react funnier than the crowd of kids around him, and so they scorned him as an outcast. And as a grown man, he became an outcast. You've met people that are just loners and outcasts, and you wonder what happened to this person when they were small. They say that something like 7 out of every 10 women in America, and this is some American psychology census that was done, 7 out of 10 women in America can admit in surveys to having been abused in some way sexually as children or approached in the wrong way as young women. This is traumatic. We don't know how many young boys will come forth. They're a lot slower to come forth even than females are and admit to something wrong being done to them, bullied into something. But some people have such horrible things done that they're driven into constant trauma. This is what begins to twist the mind, the will, and the emotions. In other words, the soul, the psyche. That is where the enemy works. Do you know how to heal somebody? You can't just heal them by clapping hands on them or pouring oil down their throats or... And I've done all those things. I'll still do it. You want me to clap hands on you? I'll be glad to do it, if that'll help you. To say, now at this moment, I'll change my thinking. If we need an action like that, but it's not the action that does it. That's more of a ceremony. When we really heal someone's soul, it's because we speak with them. We put new ideas in their head and convince them that this is a better idea than the one you've been living with. We convince them with love. We convince them with gentle persuasion. And as they change their thinking, I've watched it in churches. Somebody comes in, they thought one thing that's made them angry for years. Some other preacher put an angry idea inside of them. They'll come to another church where they explain the gospel and they explain the person of God in a more loving way. And I've seen people over a period of weeks just transform. Change the way they treat their family, their brothers and sisters, change the way they regard others at work and in their neighborhood. The gospel changes the mind and drives out all of the wrong psyches. We need to teach the gospel to one another, but not just with the finger pointed in the air and the other finger pointed on the Holy Writ and pontificating over people. But we preach the gospel by the way we treat people in Jesus' name. and the way we represent the loving God to people. This guy's in his right mind. And verse 16 says, and they that saw it declared unto them how it befell him that was possessed with devils. Now, the crowd from the city has heard it once in the city. The swineherds ran into the city and told them everything. Now they bring it out and tell it again. Why do they tell the townspeople the same story twice? Well, they told it once on their own, and now they're telling it, saying, here are the two witnesses of what happened. This man whom you all know, look at him now. He's calling himself by his own name. He's asking people to forgive him. He's saying that he forgives people that mistreated him. And here's Jesus of Nazareth. We wanted to bring all of you out here to hear it from them and to see them. And they that saw it declared unto them how it befell him that was possessed with devils, and concerning the swine. And they began to beseech him, Jesus, to depart from their borders. Get out of here. Why? Why didn't they want him to stay? Jesus went to Samaria and talked to the woman at the well. And the people of Samaria came and begged him to stay. And he stayed for a total of 3 days with them. Why did these people tell Jesus to leave? Well, because they make their capital off of pig keeping. He has wrecked their economy. You want to know things? Solomon said, follow the money trail. Any question you have, money will answer it. People, I hear those prosperity guys. The Bible says money answereth all things. No, y'all are preaching it wrong. It's not that money does all things. It answers any question you have. You want to know why people act the way they act? Money, the love of money, is going to be at the root of their decision-making and their emotions. These people have just lost the equivalent of hundreds of thousands of dollars in today's testimony. These guys have lost their work. The owners have lost their livestock. They're lying down there in the ocean. They're already sending people down there to see what they can scavenge, or the lake rather. See what they can scavenge and butcher quickly. That it might be salted up and still sold, but ain't nobody going to want to buy it if they hear it comes from demon-possessed meat. They tell Jesus, that's a big rumor, right? Even in Corinth, the only place you could go to buy meat, every butcher shop was connected to some little shrine or temple, because the whole city was given over to different idolatries, it being a port city. There's a seaport here and one there, and ships from as far away as Spain and Egypt would come in to Corinth. And so all kinds of religions are represented there. Sailors want to get off their ship and give thanks to their God, or get on a ship and first offer a little sacrifice. So they buy an animal, bring it, and it is sacrificed in the temple. They pay the priest. Thank you for the blessing. They go. Now the animal's carcass is butchered in the butcher shop next door. And that's how you get meat. And in Corinth, in Paul's time, you'll find this in the book of Acts and in 1 Corinthians. In Corinth, if you go out to buy meat from a butcher, most likely it was an animal that had been sacrificed to a devil the night before. And so the Corinthians had this idea, now that we're Christians, and you told us, Paul, that James told you to tell us Gentiles not to eat meat that's been sacrificed to idols. Is it because there's evil spirits still in that meat? And Paul writes to them and says, no, all of your food is cleansed because you give thanks to God. Offering of thanks cleanses the food. Go ahead and eat it. But don't tell anybody where it came from. Just you and God. Don't ask, don't tell. But if James and some of his people show up at your church, they come from Jerusalem, and they see you eating meat that came from an idol's temple, it's going to hurt them. You know why? Because they have little faith. They have little faith. And you don't want to offend them. So just don't eat. And rather than offending those people for their crazy beliefs, I'll just become a vegetarian and not eat meat anymore as long as the world stands, Paul says. But he said, let's go along with what James said, but not because we believe there's demons in the meat. Demons don't live in dead meat. They certainly don't live in dead pigs. I heard one guy say, and those demons were carried in the pigs' bodies and they ran over the cliffs and they drowned. What happened to the demons then? Well, they're underwater. And that is why a few weeks later Jesus walks on the water to keep them under his feet. Okay, cute sermon, but unlikely. They are cast into the abyss, into the water. Anyway, they want Jesus to leave. In the Matthew version, it says the same thing. Depart out of our borders. In the Luke version, it says, all the people of the country of the Gerasenes round about asked him to depart from them, for they were holden with great fear. Verse 18 of Mark, is this interesting to you all? Verse 18 of Mark says, and when he was come into his boat, or King James loves to use the word ship for a little boat like that, he that had been possessed of the devil prayed him that he might be with him. Now I love this. Jesus says, well, I have to go. We left last night around midnight to come across the water just so I could meet you here today, my friend. And hugs him again. Won't you stay longer? They're telling us to leave. Well, then can I go with you and be one of your disciples? He wants to get in that boat. You know what Jesus tells him? We're going to read it in all three versions. He that had been possessed with the devil besought him that he might be with him. That's not mentioned at all in Matthew, but in Luke, the man from whom the devils were gone out prayed him that he might be with him. But Jesus sent him away, saying, return to thine house and declare how great things God hath done for thee. And he went his way, publishing throughout the whole city how great things Jesus had done for him. But the Mark version's a little different. Well, you see it in Mark. Go back to verse 19, Brother Chris, if you don't mind. Howbeit Jesus suffered him not, but said unto him, go home to thy friends, not just to the city, but your friends, and tell them how great things the Lord has done for thee. Now, so right there, the man must say, I don't have any friends. I ain't got no friends. Of course, Matthew wrote that he had one crazy friend, just as crazy as he was. But he says, tell my friend. Jesus says, you're going to have friends now. People who used to be your friends since you were a child. You're going to have friends. Go and tell them how great things the Lord hath done for thee and how he had mercy on thee. What's this man going out to preach to people? The gospel of mercy. Mercy. And he went his way and began to publish in Decapolis. Now, how many of you know what Decapolis is? I've mentioned it before. Is there anybody that does know? What is it, Jerry? Yes. Deca means 10. Polis means city. Decapolis. The 10 cities. These had been built during the days of the Maccabees, before the time of Christ. They're large cities. Capernaum is one of them. They have Jewish and Gentile populations. Because of the Decapolis, Old Hebrew has slowly been forgotten as the language of the Greeks, spread from the Decapolis north and south throughout Palestine. Because of this, the New Testament was written not in Hebrew, but in Greek. And so he goes to publish in the whole Decapolis. This guy doesn't just go to one city, but he goes to 10 cities, preaching in the whole Decapolis to Jews and Gentiles. How great things God has done and showed mercy on me. How great things Jesus has done for him, and all men did marvel. Now I'm going to tell you, this is the second evangelist we have found in the Bible. I mean, in the life of Christ. The second person. He goes out preaching in Jesus' name, teaching the mercy and forgiveness of the great God, who has done for him what no other man could do and no other God. He's the second person to begin to do this. Who was the first? Can you remember? I've mentioned that first one tonight. Huh? The woman at the well. The woman at the well who, several months earlier, had run into the city that used to be Samaria, and she is now called Sychar. And she had told everyone in the city, come see a man who will tell you everything that I've ever done. They ran out there to hear that story. And when they got there, they found Jesus sitting on the well box. And instead of telling them about her, Jesus reached up and told them about God. And that woman had brought them. And as I've already said, they asked him to stay for 2 extra days, making 3 days in all. But this one's a little different. This is a man who said, I want to come with you. And Jesus says to that former demoniac, you know you can serve God a whole lot better. But I know I can learn a whole lot from you. Jesus says, I commission you to go. Everybody knows you around here. You're the crazy man they all talked about. I want you to go to them and tell them about me. Jesus sends him forth to do this, and we're told that he does it. Now, ain't that something? And that is why Jesus had made that trip across the lake to come here just to deal with this man and then get back in his boat and go back across to Capernaum. As I mentioned before, that shows the importance to Jesus of one soul he could touch. Why is there rejoicing in heaven over one sinner that repents or one child of God that's brought back to the Father? Why is there rejoicing in heaven? Because there is no telling how greatly the kingdom of heaven can multiply from the testimony of one witness that has received something great from God. Your life as an individual, speaking things about what the Lord has done for you to others, has a greater impact on this city, this county, than you can ever imagine or will ever know until you get to heaven. In verse 21, when Jesus has crossed over again in the boat to the other side, turns out this is Capernaum, a great multitude was gathered unto him, and he was by the sea. Now remember the day before, a great multitude was in the house where he taught in Capernaum. And then he went down by the seashore, and a great multitude nearly came. They thronged him so much he had to sit in the boat. And that is why after he taught them until dark, that the disciples rowed a good ways out in a group of boats. And then he said, I'll tell you where we're going. Go over there. There's somebody I want to see early tomorrow morning. And he goes over and deals with the demoniac after going through a storm. Now he's come back the next day, and that multitude is still waiting. That's him. He's coming. See the little sail or the little boats rowing up? There he is. He's coming back. And the word goes out in the city, and they all get around him. And verse 22 says, there came one of the rulers of the city. Yeah, one of the rulers of the synagogue, Jairus by name. And when he saw Jesus, he fell at his feet. Just change it along with me, Brother Chris. And he besought him greatly, saying, my little daughter lieth at the point of death. I pray thee, come and lay thy hands on her, that she may be healed and she may live. Stop it right there. This is what is said in the Matthew version. My daughter is even now dead. Even now dead. But come and lay thy hand upon her, and she shall live. In the Luke version, he falls at Jesus' feet and beseeches him and besought him to come to his house, for he had an only daughter, about 12 years of age, and she lay a-dying. Now, which is correct? Luke is the only one that tells us the girl's 12 years old at this point. Matthew says that Jairus says she's already dead. Mark and Luke, Jairus is saying, please come so she will not die. Which one is it? What do you think? Anybody got an explanation for that seeming contradiction? Is the girl already dead when Jairus comes to Jesus? Well, Mark and Luke both put it down that the girl wasn't dead yet. Matthew's the one who says that she's already dead. So which is it? I mean, people will tell you, if one thing in the Bible is wrong, it's all wrong. I've been told that before. Could it be that they're all right because of what we're about to read? When they finally are on the way to the house. Go to Mark, verse 35. While he yet spake, there came from the ruler of the synagogue's house certain which said, thy daughter is dead, why troublest thou the master any further? So I think Matthew just jumps ahead to that. And Jesus turns, while they're on their way to Jairus' house. Some of Jairus' men come and meet him and said, don't trouble the master, your daughter has just died while you were gone looking for Jesus. And now Matthew has Jairus turning to Jesus saying, my daughter is now dead. Please come with me, you can restore life to her. I don't think it's a contradiction. When they first meet, she hadn't died yet. While they're on the way, she dies and Jairus learns of it. Does that make sense? Is that worth taking time to tell you? All right. So, back to Mark chapter 5, verse 24. And so Jesus goes with him, and the great multitude follows him, and they throng him. And a woman which had an issue of blood 12 years. Matthew says the same thing. 12 years. Luke says 12 years. This means that whoever this woman is that's in the city, she's had an issue of blood ever since Jairus' daughter had been born. When the little girl was born, it's 12 years ago. 12 years ago is when this older woman got sick with her blood disease. Jesus is going to deal with two 12-year-old issues right now. And Mark goes on and says that this woman has suffered many things of physicians. That doesn't speak too well of medical practice in those days, does it? You suffer at the hands of a physician. You know what they would do? Oh, she's got bad blood. What we need to do is get a lot of the bad blood out of her, and they would cut her and bleed her. You know, they were still doing that. American doctors were still doing that right up almost to the time of the Civil War. So George Washington was bled to death by doctors. Well, the best thing we can do is get bad blood out. Yeah, great. Take the blood out of a person's body. That'll help them a lot. Idiocy. But they were doing it. And that's how you suffer at the hands of an ignorant so-called physician. This woman, you can imagine if they treated her that way, she's as pale as a sheet of paper. She's as fragile as a little featherless bird. Trembling. Not only that, She's got an issue of blood, probably unstoppable menstruation. It continues throughout the month. Moses wrote about it and said, if there's a woman like this, any person that has an issue of blood, then any chair she sits on is unclean, and anyone who sits on the same chair she has sat on will be unclean. You can find this in Leviticus. If she touches anyone, or if she prepares food and someone eats from a plate that she has touched, that person will be unclean. If she walks through a crowd and touches anyone, everyone she touches is unclean. This means that this woman is a pariah. She's a social outcast. She's not allowed into anyone's home. She's not allowed to touch anybody. And what he adds is that this woman, she suffered many things of physicians and had spent all that she had, and was nothing bettered, but rather grew worse, having, well, I'll stop right there. Luke says, not that she suffered from physicians, but she spent all of her living upon physicians, and could not be healed of any. She came. Well, what does this mean? She spent all her living, that's every last penny she had, her inheritance, everything. Matthew adds to that these physicians tortured her in some way. She suffered by them. So she's not only lost her health, she's not only lost her social standing, but she's lost all of her material wealth. She's down in all ways, physically and soulishly and spiritually. But here's what Mark says that the others don't say. Next verse, Brother Chris. When she had heard of Jesus. I love this. The RV says, having heard the things concerning Jesus. This little woman says, they say that's him passing by. They say that he can heal people. I don't dare go through the crowd trying to get to him. They'll throw me on the ground and trample me. I can't get to him. This crowd here in Capernaum is always around him. How can I do it? And she waits for the crowd to pass by so that she can now come behind people and push her way through. They won't see her coming. Excuse me, sometimes she's touched, by the time she has touched somebody and they turn to see who she is, they all back away. And she's touching the next person in front, and they see who she is, and they back away. She's touched me. They're all upset that she's touched them. Finally, she finds herself standing in front of Jesus. All three versions say she came from behind and touched his garment, for she said, if I touch but his garment, I shall be made whole. Luke is the one that says, the hem of his garment. That suggests that she has been knocked down on the ground. And she touches that lower part of his garment that would drag in the dust, as though saying to herself, well, I guess I'm not worthy to stand like all these people in his presence. We're going to read that those around Jesus were packed up against him as he walked and thronged. This little woman said, if I can just touch not even him, but something connected to him, his clothes, even the lowest part of his clothes, that alone would heal me. Now he's on his way to raise a little girl from the dead that was born about the same time this lady got her sickness. Just a touch from him will do it. We're out of time tonight. We'll pick this up. Just a word from him will raise the 12-year-old girl from the dead. But the interesting thing at this point is that, again, in Mark, and straightway she touches the hem of his garment, as Luke says, and the fountain of her blood was dried up. She felt in her body. Matthew and Luke don't say that. Introspectively. So this means that Mark has talked to the woman. She told Mark or Peter or whoever wrote the gospel we call the Gospel of Mark. She's told somebody what she had thought at the time. She felt in her body that she was healed of her plague. And straightway Jesus, perceiving in himself that the virtue or power going out of him, King James says virtue had gone out of him, turned him about in this press of people and say, who touched my clothes? Is he not omniscient? Does he not know everything? Does he not know who she is? We like to think so. If he does know who touched his clothes, he ain't letting on who. He wants her to come forth and identify herself. You stand up before all these people. Come on. Come on. You stand up and tell everybody what just happened to you. Same thing as he had done early that morning with the demoniac. What is thy name? Come on forth now, lady. Tell us your name. And she, is this worth listening to? I really have to stop for your sake, but just a couple of points. Who is the one who touched? And they say, are you kidding? Everybody's touching you. Thou seest multitudes thronging you. And you, are you crazy, Lord? You say, who touched you? Everybody had been touching you. And he looked around about to see her that had done this thing. That implies that he did know who she was. But the woman, fearing and trembling, knowing what had been done to her, came and fell down before him and told him all the truth. Now, I'll be through now. One more comment. Telling all the truth sounds like you're confessing to some offense, doesn't it? Confessing to some crime or some sin. Okay, I'll tell you all the truth. Something I didn't want to say. And she says it in front of all these people. And what was her offense? Actually, it was a crime. She's a woman with an issue of blood. A fountain of blood, one of the Gospels says. An unstanched flowing of blood. That means it is in Levite courts a crime, an offense against humanity for her to walk into a crowd as she's done and touch people. She looks at all of them and says, I touched you, I touched some of you, I touched some of you. You wouldn't let me do it, but I had to get to him. She told all the truth. I had to get to him. Same reason you all are around. And look, I'm healed. I perceive in my body I'm healed. And Jesus, to let all of them know that she's no longer to be considered unclean, embraces her in all three Gospels and calls her daughter and says, thy faith has made you whole. Thank you for your attention tonight. Thank you so much for coming to listen to these ideas about the Gospels. Give Pastor James a hand as he comes.